What's something that's way scarier than most people realize? Story 1, driving. Multi-ton chunks of metal hurtling past you fast enough to turn you into paste, piloted by the general public. I didn't realize until I started driving how mental it actually is. You're in machines that can easily end on impact, relying on other people knowing how to drive and understand signs and instructions. All it takes is one mental person you don't know swaying to the opposite side of the road to overtake crashing into you for sudden death. And that does happen. Story 2, the people whom you shared everything with turning against you. I'm so sorry, I have no personal experience with it myself, but I once knew a guy whose wife had cheated on him with his best friend that he'd grown up with. His wife had been his high school sweetheart, too. It had done such a number on him. Sometimes I still think about it and feel sad. Story 3, carbon monoxide. You can't see it, smell it, or taste it, but it can end you in your sleep. We had a gas leak in my house about 3 times when I was a kid. It was either during a snowstorm that the vents would get covered in snow, or a tree that fell on it or something. That's also why it has that very particular smell added to it, otherwise, you would never be able to tell. My mom would smell it every time. Honestly, if it wasn't because of her, we could have died a couple times. She would wake up straight away and go get me and my brothers. Once I barely remember, I was like 9 or 10, but we ended up in hospital. My mom called my aunt, who lived next door, to come and drive us. And the other one I do remember vividly was when I was like 18. This was like 15 years ago. I used to secretly smoke at night. My mom wasn't dumb, she knew, but I would deny it every time. So I always left the window next to my bed slightly open. I believe that was a blessing in disguise. Having fresh air right next to my face, I got out of bed, made it to the stairs. Luckily, it was almost all the way down when I just lost control of my legs. It's like your whole body is made of jelly, scary. Story 4, asthma attacks when you are alone. Freaking terrifying. There is no fear like your body trying to end you. Waking up in the middle of the night, can't breathe and can't find your inhalers. It's like a reverse nightmare, where once you're fully awake, it's even more terrifying. The absolute horror of not even being able to properly breathe in your life saving medicine is something I cannot overemphasize. Story 5, buildings. I did structural inspections of new construction for years, and let me tell you, it's terrifying. Doesn't matter who built it or who paid for it, every single public building you've ever been in has had corners cut either due to simple negligence or deliberately in the interest of saving time and money. Also, roads, for that matter. I was 8 when the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and it took me until just a couple years ago to realize that that single event, and especially seeing all the pictures and video with the dead kids and the whole front of the building gone, is the reason I'm uncomfortable inside hotels and multi-story office buildings. It's not a phobia, and I'm not anxious exactly. I just dislike it and feel constant low-level discomfort in them. Important context. I wasn't allowed to watch TV as a kid other than the news and a couple PBS programs, so I was more informed about, more exposed to, and more affected by current events than the average child. Seeing the video of the Rodney King beating when I was 4 was another thing that really left its mark on me and my development. Story 6, rabies. Rabies is scary. Rabies, it's exceptionally common, but people just don't run into the animals that carry it often. Skunks especially, and bats. Let me paint you a picture. You go camping, and at midday, you decide to take a nap in a nice little hammock. While sleeping, a tiny brown bat, in the rage stages of infection, is fidgeting in broad daylight, uncomfortable and thirsty due to the hydrophobia. And you snort, startling. He goes into attack mode, except you're asleep and he's a little brown bat, so weighs around 6 grams. You don't even feel him land on your bare knee, and he starts to bite. His teeth are tiny, hardly enough to even break the skin, but he does manage to give you the equivalent of a tiny scrape that goes completely unnoticed. Rabies does not travel in your blood. In fact, a blood test won't even tell you if you've got it. Antibody tests may be done, but are useless if you've ever been vaccinated. You wake up, none the wiser. If you notice anything at the bite site at all, you assume you just lightly scraped it on something. The bomb has been lit, and your nervous system is the wick. The rabies will multiply along your nervous system, doing virtually no damage and completely undetectable. You literally have no symptoms. It may be 4 days, it may be a year, but the camping trip is most likely long forgotten. Then one day your back starts to ache, or maybe you get a slight headache. At this point, you're already dead. There is no cure. The sole caveat to this is the Milwaukee Protocol, which leaves most patients dead anyway, and the survivors mentally disabled, and is seldom done. There's no treatment. It has a 100% end rate. Story 7, Flowing Water. I've spent my entire life living in towns near rivers. Every winter people die, every summer people die. In winter, it's people who underestimate the cold. In summer, it's people who underestimate the flow. I agree, I fell out of a kayak. It wasn't even white water, but the current was still strong enough that no one on earth could fight it. River water is also totally chaotic. You never get to settle to even think about swimming against the current. Story 8, The Ocean. It's beautiful until you realize you're floating over a deep, dark abyss filled with who knows what. Counterpoint. I used to feel sad that I would probably never live into a future where we explore other planets and discover alien life. Then I saw some deep sea documentaries and realized that we have aliens down there, more ridiculously alien visually and functionally than most fictional aliens I've read about or seen in cinema. This makes me happy, though terrified at the same time when I occasionally snorkel or scuba dive. And also, I cannot eat octopus. Riptides are a great example of this. Fairly common, to a point where here in Australia we learn the signs to watch out for during school swimming lessons, but deadly to the unprepared or unknowing. And these are just off the beach, not even going out to the depths. Dozens, hundreds, tourists get pulled out of rips by surf lifesavers every year at our busiest beaches. Story 9, I bias. Like, seriously, we're feeding these AI systems massive data sets, and those data sets are inherently biased, reflecting all the prejudices and inequalities of our own messed up world. I remember one or more of the big AI devs putting a big disclaimer out that basically said, we trained this thing on the crap you've all been saying, so it might come out with some messed up crap on occasion. As if we didn't already learn that from Tay the Twitter bot when she turned into an extremist after like 3 days of existing. The sole caveats to this is the Milwaukee Protocol, which leaves most patients dead anyway, and the survivors mentally disabled and is seldom done. There's no treatment. It has a 100-bone end rate. Story 10, Antibiotic Resistance. People absolutely don't realize how absolutely terrifying this is. Resistant bacteria like MRSA are already tough to treat, and lots of people are asymptomatically colonized with it. If our toughest antibiotics no longer touch it, we're going to fall back to the days where pneumonia was a death sentence, and you could easily die from a simple cut on your leg. Story 11, Scuba Diving. Once you get deep enough that you can't see the sky above you, it gets unsettling real fast. Videos of cave scuba diving have been my latest horror obsession. Squeezing through tight passages in scuba gear. So tight that you have to wear your tanks mounted at your sides instead of on your back, knowing you might kick up silt and lose all visibility, knowing you'll be pitch black if your lights fail. Shutters. I know they have lifelines, but still, horrifying. And people do it recreationally. Story 12, Incompetence in Charge. We were having a big laugh about our ridiculous manager and swapping stories about all the bat crap insane stuff he'd done over the years. Then I remembered that I'd openly laughed at him on a couple of occasions and he had a massive influence on my career progression. And suddenly it wasn't funny anymore, especially in the military. Incompetence in charge, quite literally, is usually fatal. And it is fatal not just to that person, but everyone else who has the misfortune or bad luck of being under their command. That is why if you ask a vet who saw combat what really matters in an active war zone, they are going to say two things only: competence and courage. Story 13. Tuberculosis, our oldest enemy and the most effective human predator. Silent, deadly, it can lie in wait for years before letting you know it's there, and then it will slowly eat away at you until you die. We do have a treatment, but the disease is still prevalent in poor countries and making a resurgence in developed nations like the US. However, it ends people slow enough to not raise alarms, not paralyze the economy, and not generate a coordinated effort to eradicate it. As a doctor, it is one of the few contagious diseases I'm always wary of. You can be fully vaccinated and still contract the disease. Story 14. Relying on digital versus physical media and currency. Once we go completely over to digital media only, the companies get full control over what we're allowed to watch. Once we go completely over to digital currency only, the governments get full control over our money. And before anyone tries to be a smartass and say they already have, they don't. They do have a lot of control, but that's no excuse to give them more. I collect physical movies, shows, games, comics, and books. I use physical money whenever I can, and I'll continue this for as long as I can. But people are dumb. I expect us to be completely dependent on digital stuff within the next 50 years because people just can't realize until it's too late that this will lead to horrible dystopian consequences. Story 15. The United States of America is losing their grip. If it is happening, they will traverse the route of all waning empires. The loss of control will press the politicians to expand territory. War is inevitable, and Canada is ripe for the U.S., which will draw the ire of all of Europe, and then some. On this note, just how fragile the veneer of civilization truly is, and how fast things can really go to crap. People in charge playing political games and tech bros playing with fire really do believe that their careers and fortunes are permanent and immutable, and not just a polite fiction propped up by millions of real people out there, for now. If it goes to crap, there won't be anyone to keep their bunkers running for more than a few days. They won't get to stay in their bunkers when their fortunes don't exist because the system has collapsed. Story 16. Food allergies. They can come out of absolutely nowhere, escalate dramatically, and make your favorite foods essentially poison, but no one else tends to care, especially if it's something that is a ridiculously common ingredient, and you are sensitive enough that breathing in and touching crumbs is enough for your immune system to go crazy. Sure, you will have epinephrine on hand after the first instance of anaphylaxis, but anaphylaxis is terrifying. Being on the receiving end of epi while still conscious is like suddenly going from being unable to breathe to feeling like you just did a massive line of coke, wherein you need to use that momentum to save your own life, whilst keenly being aware of that fact. It's traumatic as crap, and I hope none of y'all ever have to experience it. Lifelong tree nut allergy, 4 anaphylactic episodes in 35 years. The worst part is, people don't realize that nuts leave dander everywhere. I had anaphylaxis from eating at a table where the person who sat there previously had eaten almonds. Also, recently diagnosed with adult onset shellfish allergy, one of my favorite foods. Luckily, I knew the signs and caught it before it got bad. But it's likely going to be an anaphylactic allergy. Story 17. I get nightmares, which I struggle to tell apart from reality, often involving friends or family leaving me and or doing the worst things I could imagine. I've woken up several times needing to throw up or wishing I could just die to make it easier. I have lost friends because I remember reprehensible things they did that never happened. In middle school, I refused to talk to anyone because I thought they'd all try to get me suspended or mock me incessantly, which came from a recurring nightmare I had for years. Nowadays, my sleep is sporadic. I'll sleep for 4 hours a day or 14 hours a day. Sometimes I wake up in a literal puddle of sweat. Sometimes I wake up 4 times in a dream before I can even wake up IRL once. Sometimes I do wake up IRL on, but feeling like whatever nightmare I just had has already happened and that I'm destitute or paralyzed or etc., which can take an hour or more to wear off. Nightmares were always told to me to be this thing that kids had that made them not want to sleep. They can be way, way worse. The only positive thing is that I do not get fazed by anything that happens in real life anymore. And I spend a lot of waking hours just happy that I'm awake and doing okay for myself. Your boss yelling at you to hit an impossible deadline goes way over way better when you woke up that morning from a dream in which he fired you for leaning back in your chair. Story 18. The universe, comets in particular. And we aren't able to map out and track comets like we are asteroids until they're basically already coming at us. As a scary example, there was a comet a few decades ago that left holes in Jupiter's gas clouds that were bigger than the Earth itself. Now, could you imagine what would happen if that comet came towards us instead? There would be absolutely nothing that. Story 19. That there are confused old people with dementia driving on the roads. Worked at a hospital in a smallish town and met a confused patient who drove 1.5 hours away from home. Another confused patient thought it was the year 1984, drove on the wrong side of the highway and got into an accident a week prior. Left AMA angrily that day. Both are likely still driving. Story 20. Water. People tend to think about wind and lightning when it comes to scary weather stuff, but far more people die in water than those. The most damaging part of a hurricane by far is the storm surge. The water that the extreme low pressure of the storm carries along with it as it comes on shore, basically bringing the ocean sometimes miles inland. Massive amounts of rain can bring flooding when rivers overtake their floodplains. Flash flooding can basically bring water moving like a river down streets and carry cars, trees, even buildings along with it. It doesn't take much for it to drag you under and drown you, and it can hide countless dangerous hazards in the mud and debris it's carrying including the simple fact of how deep it is. People vastly underestimate it. Story 21, Real Narcissistic People. I really didn't experience such a thing until later in my life, and I was amazed how these people could seem to be lovely and caring and how far they could go to reach their goals, and how absurd their goals could be. Also, how they could damage a whole family, even their own kids. Like, really, if someone had told me before, I wouldn't believe it. Story 22, The Singularity. AI is advancing at a faster rate than many experts have previously estimated only 1 to 2 years ago. Some experts are now moving up their estimates for the achievement of AGI, an AI that matches or surpasses human performance at any task, to occur within the next 1 or 2 years. What will our society look like after 90% of our jobs become automated? Is there a future where ASI, an AI far beyond human level intelligence, and humans can peacefully coexist? Story 23, over the counter, anti inflammatories like ibuprofen. They can have really damaging effects on your digestive system long term and can lead to things like stomach ulcers. Now, I used to read comments like this and think, that won't be me. I always make sure to take mine with food and wait the recommended amount of time in between doses. Well, it was me. I was taking it for chronic pain management with no issues when all of a sudden it randomly snuck up on me one night. I genuinely felt sicker than I ever had before. My IBS flare ups, the flu, and even norovirus didn't hold a candle to the nausea and stomach pain I was experiencing. Thankfully, I didn't develop stomach ulcers, but 2 years of daily fast acting ibuprofen really hit me hard. Story 24, Small, Cute, Wild Animals. Yes, the raccoon you found in your backyard is adorable, but it can also carry rabies, so please stop trying to pick it up or hand feed it. A man in Minnesota this past September literally died of rabies despite getting the post exposure prophylactic. The odds aren't super high of getting rabies, getting the vaccine, and dying anyways. But Jesus Christ, if there's a chance of definite death from rabies, can we not take it, please? Story 25, Concussions. People consider concussions a small bump on the head that gets better after a couple days of resting. In reality, concussions are a traumatic brain injury. Many people who get them have lifelong complications and side effects from them that can impact things like vision, hearing, and cognition. To add insult to injury in these cases, when people are hearing that you can't work because you had a concussion 2 years ago, they don't take you seriously because they don't understand how serious concussions can be. So it can be very isolating and frustrating for the person who is dealing with the consequences of that concussion. In reality, they are incredibly serious and can be permanently disabling. Always wear your helmet when you're writing anything with wheels it's not enclosed. Story 26, The Idea of a Multiverse. Come think of it, there's a reason we are always taught to be present, in the here and now. If in any way the multiverse via the string theory is unequivocally proven true, and we can peek to other universes, we might get lost in the what ifs of our lives, both past and future, which can lead to widespread psychological crisis or worse, be capitalized by companies for profit. Story 27, High Voltage DC Power. It's used all over the place in industrial settings and power plants. ACU stand a chance of being able to break contact with the source. D that finds a place to arc will just keep arcing until it literally burns up the thing it's arcing through. I have a piece of 138 kV bus from a job site that had a heater wire that got just a little bit too close to a pinhole. It's burned away a significant quantity of the rubber and ceramic coating. It vaporized the heater wire back to the ground. Now imagine you're bebopping through an automotive factory on a forklift and you make contact with an overhead bus, run enough to expose the copper. You are now the heater wire. After the third bus strike on a construction site from an owner's contractor, as the systems were going live, I wouldn't let my PEs walk unescorted through hot areas. If they have to see someone die, it will at least be with a grizzled veteran of the industry that's going to immediately respond by getting them the hell out of there. Story 28. When someone grabs your arm to help you cross a road and you're blind or visually impaired. Most people don't ask for consent first and just grab and push you, so at that point, you have no idea what their intentions are, and you don't have enough visual information to be sure of their body language or facial expressions. On another note, if you grabbing me saves my life or potentially does, then go for it. Had a lady grab me last night as I was finding the edge of the path with my foot, having already found it with my cane, and she thought I was going to walk into traffic. I just let her know I was okay and what I was doing, and she apologized, and we both went on our way. Much less terrifying than being pushed into a road when you are not confident it's safe. Story 29. As a doctor, I have three answers: pregnancy and childbirth. It is for me one of the most inhumane things a human has to endure: urinary tract infection. One day it's just a nagging pain when you pee. Next week, it could ascend to the kidney, make it fail, and toxins accumulate within your body, while your doctor struggles to find the answer because UTI could be very, very stealthy. Poorly educated people with questionable morale who doubt and are against modern medicine. Story 30. There's a large lift span bridge between my city and the other across the canal, which serves as the only way to get across. And my side has the hospital. At least when I was little, they used to park an ambulance on the other side somewhere, just in case something happened and the bridge wasn't usable. I drove by where said ambulance used to sit the other day and was a little taken aback to see it wasn't there. A lift bridge like this works via the center span of the bridge, decks and all, being lifted up and out of the middle and the way by a series of big old cables. And I have seen it malfunction more than once. So if you had the misfortune of having, say, a heart attack while a malfunction happened, well, I guess I'm not even sure if that ambulance would be able to save you. The next nearest hospital on the side of the bridge opposite to me would be a 35-mile drive. The only level 2 trauma center is 100-ish miles away, and also where any medical helicopter would be taking off from if need be. I used to pretty much never think about how scary the situation is until I got older. But I'm sure that bridge could totally contribute to someone not being able to get